Buenas noches. This is Café, Chisme, Revolución y qué. And you are listening in with myself. I am Xochi Gonzalez. And I have tonight my co-hosts, Chimali and also Esti. You can go first.
Sure. I go by Esti. My screen name on Instagram is Smoke Dreams, and that's Smoke Dreams with a 0, in case anybody wants to follow. Thank you.
Gracias.
My name is Chimali.
Okay, gracias, Chimale. A little bit about this podcast is this is a revolutionary podcast. A little bit of it is going to be chisme, pláticas, throughout Aslan, cultura, historia. And this is something that you can be doing while sipping on your cafecito, whether it's in the morning or in the, tardecita or at night. So right now our topic for tonight is going to be about our Chicano movement. So we're going to be going over basically the history from the very beginning. We're all going to be discussing, of course, but if you can start off, I think, when would you say that our Chicano movement actually started? Because everybody seems to think that the Chicano movement started like in the 60s. But in reality, we can just go way, way back from the very beginning. So do you want to explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, if you take Chicano studies classes, they will always start, pre-Columbian, right? That's what they call it. But our resistance, the Chicano movement, starts with Columbus. Because when he set foot here in the Bahamas, he didn't even come to what is called the United States, into the continental the United States, right? He went to the Bahamas. That's where he landed, and when he was there, he enslaved, mutilated the indigenous people, the Taino, and what he did is he just committed mass genocide upon them, cutting off their limbs, and if they wouldn't bring enough gold, they would cut off their limbs and rape their women in front of them, so yeah, we want to just we want to talk about how that right there, that was the beginning of resistance to the movement, in the movement. And then in 1519, when Cortés came with like about 500, Spanish conquistadores, they came to Tenochtitlan, and they went over there and they fought against the Aztec Empire, and the Azteca, the Mexica, they resisted, so that right there is again like an example of resistance against colonialism, against the colonial empires that came here. So, that's what we're talking about. The Chicano movement it's a movement of resistance against colonialism, against imperialism, and then again in 1846, when the United States invaded Mexico, and they call it the Mexican-American War, but it was actually the American-Mexican War, because they were the aggressors. They invaded Mexico.
Yes.
They provoked a war illegally by crossing into Mexico, and then shooting at the soldiers, and then like saying, "Oh well, they shot at us back, so that means that we're going to go over there and invade them, and that we declare war." And then when the French, came in, Cinco de Mayo, one of those important days that we did talk about in another show, talking about how the French came in, and the Mexicanos there, the pueblos, the indígenas, the soldiers, they went and resisted against the French, and they defeated the French that day. And they continued to resist them until they were able to defeat them completely and kick them off their land, out of Mexico. And then it goes into, the 1920s, the Mexican Repatriation Act, where they came in and they began to deport Mexicanos. They started sweeping up Mexicanos, approximately 2 million Mexicanos, and even Chicanos that were here in the United States that were born and raised here, maybe had been here for generations already, or were just native Californios who had been here since it was Mexico.
Right.
Um, and even before then, they were indigenas because if you think about it, this used to be Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way that Mexico just said, well, everyone that's here is Mexicano, including all the indigenas that were there. So all the indigenas that were there, they all had Spanish last names and they all spoke Spanish. And they all looked brown because we're all brown, because we're all indigenas. We're all of indigenous descent.
And not to promote this, but we do see a little bit of that in the movie Mi Familia, when the
yes.
mom gets deported, and she's pregnant, and she doesn't get to see her family for like over a year because of that, because she got swept up. So
Oh, yeah. There was resistance against that too, because the Americans came in and said, well, all of you Mexicans you got to go. And they swept up all these Mexicanos, all these Chicanos, even tribal members that were native Californios who had been here for thousands of years. This is their land.
correct.
But they were just considered Mexicans because they looked brown, they had Spanish last names, they spoke Spanish. They said, y'all got to get on this train and get the fuck out. So they
Right.
deported them. And then it goes into the 1940s with the Zoot Suit riots. Actually, no, I'm sorry, not Zoot Suit riots. The sailor riots, right? Because it was U.S. sailors who attacked Zoot Suiters simply because they were showing their cultura. They were resisting against assimilating into a white colonial system, and they said, you know what, we're going to dress the way we want to dress to show our rebellion against this system.
Correct.
So the hermana Esti, she has some really great knowledge about this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Let's hear it.
we all know that the Zoot Suit, actually sailor riot, started in the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
So this happened around June 1943, but it was actually a simmering situation for a while due to heightened racial tension from the Bracero program. So a lot of the Pachucos were from migrant homes, and they were precedent, they're crucial movement to the pop culture in America because they kind of, defied the conservative stereotype of an American, where they were just kind of, rebellious. They were wild at the time, where, like I said, it was a conservative time for America during the war. So they were, kind of on the spotlight, and they did it on purpose. They started wearing these extravagant suits because they weren't accepted by society. So that led to the Sleepy Lagoon case, which was a trial that lasted for 3 months, and it involved the 38th Street kids. So it involved, both teenagers and, older kids. The Pachuca women were also blamed for being on the streets fighting with the boys. So it was all around bad. They were just very, targeted by the police at the time, and as well as the sailors that were coming in from overseas, from deployment. They were coming in, I guess, to rest while they were, over here from different states. And other states were all primarily white. So I guess when they came over here, it was a culture shock. And it was a very crazy time. It just shows how rampant the police brutality. We just have a repulsive history of brutality in Los Angeles. The times were changing, and it was a pivotal point in time for Chicano history. That started culture and trends as far as them going to jazz clubs, learning how to swing dance. It was just completely total opposite to a conservative American. And they were shown, disgust and hate and xenophobia by the white sailors.
Let's talk a little bit about the Pachucos just real quick.
Yeah.
So for those who aren't too familiar with the details of the Pachucos, and recently my capitana, and I say capitana because we're Brown Berets. We are part of the Brown Beret organization. I'm the comandante, and Esti is my capitana, and Chimali is our training officer. So real quick, we were just recently in a documentary. We were part of a documentary. Thank you to the Pachucos Unidos Internacionales. and gracias to Lázaro, our brother Lázaro. So we did get to share a little bit of history, and that was the whole purpose of sharing the history of the modern Pachucos, that we have still continued the legacy of the Pachucos. So for those of you guys who are not familiar with the Pachucos, explain to us a little bit of what, like, how they dressed and why they were hated and discriminated because of their pachuquismo.
So pretty much they were targeted for being Mexican first and foremost. Like I said, they came from migrant homes, and a lot of people didn't know English, so that was a big reason too. Was a lot of these, sorry to say it, but the white folks at the time were really extremely racist. So a lot of the Pachucos were these characters, and the term Chuco actually derives from, I guess, Chuco, Texas, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, because cuando venían de Juárez decían pa dónde van, vamos pa'l
Pachuco.
Chuco, yeah.
And from my research, that term came from describing like a shady town, chueco. It comes from that term, chueco. So it comes from that word, and like a shady character, sly character, not necessarily in a bad way, but these men wore these like just what's the word I could use, like just extravagant, outrageous suits that were kind of mocking the culture at the time.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of said, well, look at me, here I am. If you don't like me, too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a rebellion, right? Like they were rebelling against, like you said, conservatism by dressing a certain way.
Yes.
And by owning being called chuecos. They said, oh, okay, then I am a chueco.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think we need to come back with a future episode. We could have a whole episode just on Pachuquismo. So,
Yeah.
but thank you. And I think also the Pachucos at the time, the word Chicano was probably, it was not even, how could I say, it was kind of peaking. It was peaking, but it wasn't prideful to use the word Chicano then. It was very, very bad to call yourself that at the time. So,
But I think they were like the ones that began to popularize the idea of Chicanismo.
Mhm.
Right?
Absolutely.
Because they owned being called a chueco, they're like, okay, well then I'm also a Chicano, because even a Chicano was considered a bad word at one time.
yes.
To have tattoos. Was
Oh,
bad.
very.
Oh, yeah, they
was
had
bad,
tattoos, too.
for a woman to dance openly or to wear like
The women carried weapons with
and
them
to
as well.
fight, and it basically it also gave rise to like this militant matriarchy, like this
Yes.
militant mujeres who were
Equality.
just out there, fighting.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because mujeres at the time, I mean, they would smoke. The pachucas would smoke. They would drink.
Yeah.
They would
They're
dance.
hanging
they
out
would
with the boys.
Exactly, and
They backed up their men.
Yeah.
yes, and that was something that you did not have in Mexican culture in Mexico. Over
No.
here in the U.S., they developed a whole different cultura, even their own language, right?
And it just reflects a lot of problems that we still have today, like the media, for example, coming after them harshly, and labeling them delinquents, and just
And
a
the
lot
way
of-
they were brutalized as well.
Yes, it was crazy time that they faced no consequences for literally stripping people of their clothes and beating them almost
And raping the women.
to death. And,
Yeah.
But the good thing about all that was the resistance.
Yes.
Yes.
It showed once again how the youth played an important part in resistance and rebelling back. If I'm not mistaken, they all, the sailors started coming into the barrios because the youth stopped coming out. They were advised to stay home because of all these races. So the way that happened was that these sailors were starting to come into the barrios to look purposely for all the Mexicanos. And